Bloodborne was the first Souls-like that I ever played. Having almost zero knowledge about the fundamentals of Souls-like gameplay and the game itself not really explaining anything in a beginner-friendly way, I was instantly overwhelmed by the tough-as-nails combat. Especially no matter what I did, I just could not manage to get past this initial area. Finally, I thought I'd try exactly 30 more times, and if I still can't get past these enemies, I'd just drop the game. I kept trying and kept getting my ass handed to me, and the whole stamina-based combat seemed to me like an unfair, cruel joke. But then the 30th time came. My heart was jumping, my hands were sweaty, something spaghetti, and then I was finally able to So, as per my promise to myself, I quit Bloodborne and decided that it's a crappy, badly designed game that people pretend to love just so they can brag about being hardcore.
Fuck you!
And the next day I went back to it, tried like 6 more times and reached these werewolves, found these clothes, then killed the cleric beast in just a few attempts and decided that Bloodborne is my most favorite of all time.
That's because you're a loser.
Years later, something similar, although in a much smaller scale, happened during my playthrough of Skautfold Shrouded in Sanity. Visually, the game looked very inspired by Bloodborne, but in my first 20 or so minutes, I felt that combat is pretty clunky, enemies are super hard, and the unusual number of areas you're allowed to explore from the get-go quickly made me overwhelmed. So, in my frustration, I concluded that it's some indie Bloodborne fan game that someone made while learning some free game engine. But just like my first experience playing Bloodborne, something about this game kept me from quitting it right away. So I kept trying, and pretty soon I felt like,
Bingo! Alright, this is a good one.
Skautfold Shrouded in Sanity is a 2D Bloodborne-like made by a solo developer with one producer and one musician on the team. Apart from naming their game an unmarketable, hard-to-pronounce word, which is also absent from the main menu for some reason, the game is surprisingly good. And the art style, combat, level design, enemy variety, and replayability makes it difficult to believe that it's a solo project. It took me around 4 hours to get to one of its 4 endings. And again, being a solo developed game that costs just $10, which you can also get for free, watch till the end of the video to know how, I would absolutely recommend it to anyone who likes Bloodborne-like combat and wants to see how it works in the 2D space. I will be showing and discussing the bosses, but honestly, I don't think these discussions would spoil the game in any way. So unless you want to go in totally blind, I think watching this whole video would not damage your experience of the game. Either way, I'm leaving the mandatory spoiler warning here.
But first, you'll need a contract.
Just like Bloodborne, the game begins with a guy asking you to sign a contract. Then you and that guy, whose name is Waltham, appear inside a mansion where he mentions 4 knights that you'd have to kill and then kill their king. You are a woman named Weimar who had died but was dug out of the grave by Waltham to get you to sign the said contract and set you on this assassination mission. Beyond this, I have absolutely no idea about the story of the game, and since just like FromSoft games, here too NPCs talk in poetic riddles, I instantly gave up on trying to grasp the story. Instead, focused on the gameplay alone. Weimar seemingly comes straight out of Bloodborne, with a sword on one hand and a gun on the other. You have light attack, heavy attack, running attack, and rolling attack. Although I never really used these last 2 even once. Just like Bloodborne, your gun has very low damage, so it's not very effective in combat. But while the low gun damage in Bloodborne was justified by the fact that it was primarily intended to be used to parry enemies, here the gun is intended to be a straight up long range weapon, and it's pretty ineffective for that purpose. You can parry by holding down block and pressing light attack when the enemy strikes. It makes them bend the knee for a few moments when you can get close and press light attack to do a Bloodborne-like visceral attack for extra damage. It's fine, but due to lacking mechanical finesse and detailed animation, the parrying and visceral attack don't feel as good as they should. But this is no Sekiro, so you can finish the whole game without parrying even once.
You give them a karate chop.
In the beginning, combat feels a bit out of control. Unlike most stamina-based combat systems, in this one, if you keep swinging your blade, your stamina can go past 0, at which point you become exhausted and your stamina recovery speed becomes painfully slow. Since most enemies and bosses are fast and they tend to throw melee and range attacks at you, this slowdown of stamina recovery does feel a bit too much for like the first hour, as you also have to constantly roll to avoid range and AoE attacks while finding openings to strike. But still, after you give yourself a little time to get used to it, combat can feel very satisfying and fun. I was able to use the slower strong attack much more frequently in this game than in most other Souls-likes. In fact, the strong attack is so well doable that I killed this boss entirely using just well-timed strong attacks.
Because I'm too goddamn good at it.
For such a short game, there is a good variety in enemy design, although some are underutilized. There are women with bloody maid costume and super-sized scissors, jumping, igniting butlers, scarf-wearing, jumping axe dudes, gunmasters, who happen to be the easiest enemy, tentacles, just tentacles, unkillable igniting balls, unkillable gas spreaders, and Scooby-Doo ghosts who float around like weightless spirits but also leave organs and blood when they die, like real Scooby-Doo ghosts, I guess.
Well.
Some enemies like this puppet string lady or this Lovecraftian version of the jumping axe dudes or this Cthulhu type monster or this ground beef, for example, are used extremely rarely, while these butlers, jumping dudes, maids and Scooby-Doo ghosts are used almost everywhere. There is this clock that goes backwards every time you die, and some enemies like these balls only started appearing after I died too many times and the clock went too further back. So it is possible that these rarely encountered enemies would appear more frequently if you died more. If that's the case, while I appreciate this FromSoft-like cryptic feature, I still think that utilizing the enemy variety in a better way would have gotten rid of the slight repetitiveness. After killing each enemy, you have to manually extract their Vitae, which is this game's version of blood echoes or souls, meaning you drop it wherever you die and you must return to it and pick it up if you don't want to lose it for good. The idea of having to manually collect them would have added an extra layer of tension in combat if there was a short window to pick them up before they disappeared. But these Vitae lay there forever, so this manual pickup system becomes a pointless busywork. You can use these Vitae to buy bullets from this vendor. Any bullet you buy would get replenished every time you die or manually save in this clock. You can also spend Vitae to buy these things called Yeet Stones, which then allow you to buy upgrades like weapon damage, max health, max stamina, and the number of health injections you can carry. These Yeet Stones are also dropped by enemies from time to time. Why do you need to spend one kind of currency you can get from the enemy to buy another kind of currency you can also get from the enemy to then be able to buy upgrades? I don't know. Yes, something very similar exists in FromSoft games as well, but here in such a short and smaller scale game, it just felt unnecessarily complicated.
Seriously, I'm weirded out.
Although the game takes obvious inspiration from Bloodborne, it leans more towards supernatural horror with stuff like ghosts, blood sacrifice, etc. Which is why when I encountered sprites of someone blink for half a second at random places, I actually thought it's a deliberate Fight Club-like foreshadowing or something to add to the haunted atmosphere.
Now that's just pure genius.
Likewise, sometimes when trying to open a door, you get teleported to the other end of the room you're currently in, which I also thought was deliberately done to disorient you. What's more interesting is that while analyzing the footage of these anomalies, I realized that these split-second flashes are of a character which, to my knowledge, does not appear anywhere else in the game, either as an NPC or an enemy or a boss. Either way, these glitches did enhance the spooky atmosphere for me, so intended or not, they worked.
That's not so bad.
I liked how, despite the whole game taking place in a mansion and its surrounding lawn, there is a good amount of location variety in this game. There is no map and only one respawn point, which makes exploration meaningful and discovering connection between areas enjoyable. Since the single respawn point helps you organically create a mental map of the whole game as you keep exploring, dying, and finding your way back to your corpse. Despite there being some locked doors, as I'll show you in a second, the whole game map is actually accessible from the very beginning, which itself is a pretty bad idea that is only made worse by the fact that the game not only allows but encourages encourages you to kill the 4 bosses in any order you please. This, in my experience, kind of crumbles the game's structure. Here's how it went for me. I found the 4th knight first, and after several stubborn attempts, I was able to kill him. Perhaps because it was still early game for me and I hadn't yet upgraded my strength and healing much, the difficulty spike in this boss fight was surprisingly high for me, especially because the boss starts creating multiple permanent clones of himself as he keeps nearing his end, which increasingly restricted openings to damage him. But fighting him was chaotic fun, and it gave me the same old satisfaction that you get upon killing a good Souls boss. So after killing him, my expectation for the other 3 knights got much higher, only to discover that they were unusually easy.
What I need is competition.
The first knight, who was the second boss I fought, after losing about half of her health, would frequently invoke a Reaper that would pretty much one-shot you with his strike, unless you perfectly time a roll. Since I fought her after getting more used to the game, I was much skilled in the art of rolling, so this Reaper didn't particularly challenge me a lot. But I can see how it would be a big challenge for anyone who faces this first knight as their first boss encounter. Much later in the game, I think after killing 3 knights in total, I found this semi-secret area where I met a semi-secret optional boss, which is a sci-fi looking monolith that is literally an analytical computer. The game takes place in late 1800s, by the way. After killing the boss, I discovered that it gave me this item that would prevent the first knight from calling that Reaper, thus make the fight easier. Of course, I had already killed the first knight by that point because the game allowed me to, and also, I'd argue, because the first knight is much easier to find than this supercomputer. Similarly, on the way to kill the last of the 4 bosses, which in my case happened to be the 3rd knight, I obtained 2 keys that opened 2 areas that merely work as shortcuts to other areas I already had access to and didn't even have any reason to go to anymore. For a game that I found to be much smarter in other aspects, I found these structural decisions just baffling.
Don't try to understand it.
Speaking of smarter aspects of the game, after you beat the game once, it unlocks the 4 knights as playable characters. But seeing that they don't have the full arsenal of attacks and weapons that Weimar has, at first I thought it's an unfinished feature and the developer just didn't think about how one would finish the game with these characters with very different attributes. But upon trying them out, I realized that their individuality actually shuffles up the gameplay in interesting ways, kind of how different character builds in FromSoft games do, which genuinely made me intrigued to do more playthroughs with these characters. And I did. While finishing the script of this video, I started a playthrough with the self-cloning 4th knight, and armed with his clones and my knowledge of the game, I played like a speedrunner, rapidly upgraded my attack power, and with the aid of 3 other copies of my character, crushed every boss in mere seconds without ever dying, and finished the game in about 50 minutes, killing the final boss in literally 6 seconds. It was super fun.
Thank you, Final Boss.
To conclude, again, I absolutely recommend this game. This is the first game of a series comprising 4 other games, and most importantly, it literally has a free version on Steam which has the whole campaign, minus the New Game Plus, other playable characters, and some other extra content. So if you've made it till this part of this video, please give it a like, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, and then play Skautfold Shrouded in Sanity. If you like this game, I think you'll also like Lamentum, which I made a review of in my channel. It's a 2D survival horror set in the 17th century that has stamina-based melee combat, a much better and effective shooting mechanism, and a pretty dark vibe. I worked really hard on that review, but it didn't get much views, so please watch it. Thank you.